Good afternoon and welcome along. It's Simon here from Two-Way Digital, and today I'm going to be talking about performing a content review on your website. So what is a content review? Well, essentially it's a part of on-page SEO which basically verifies that all of your content that's currently published is current, relevant and accurate, and basically by checking this it allows you to create a list of things that might need editing or reviewing, and just basically making sure that your website is in tip-top shape for your visitors. Now if you know that all of your content is well written and relevant, then that's going to be easier for newer sites. But if you do know that that's the case, you may not necessarily need to do this, but if you're not sure and you need to check, then you can use this process to do that. It's always worth making sure that all of your published content is good. Well, actually, excellent is better. And we'll talk a little bit in this video about how you do that. So if you've got any questions at the end, please do feel free to ask. You can join us in our Facebook group, and I'll put a link to that below. And if you're looking at this on the website, you can obviously comment below the post. Similarly, if you're watching this on YouTube, so again, comment below the video. We'll get back to you with any questions that you may have, and we're happy to help. So let's get on with it. So what do we actually mean by well written and relevant? So in case that's not obvious, first of all, your content should be easy to understand, well written, well laid out, good spacing, and it should be interesting to look at. So the pages, for want of a better term, they need to be pretty. They need to be nice to look at, not too hard on the eye. Now, why is that? Well, when people come into your site looking for an answer to a particular question, or trying to get a problem solved, or just looking for general information, no matter what it is, if they're faced with just a big block of text, they're possibly not going to stick around. Some will, but a lot won't. Now, how your page is laid out isn't actually a ranking factor in and of itself. And so just by having a big block of text with lots of information, however pertinent and relevant that information is it's great for the user if they're going to stick around and read that kind of text. But for those that don't, that actually is where the SEO comes in. So whilst the layout isn't a ranking factor in and of itself, how long people stay on your page is. And the prettier a page looks, the more inviting it is, the easier it looks to read and consume and actually find the answers that they're looking for, because it's broken up into headings, subheadings, it's got section titles, maybe it's got highlights, graphs, bullet points, lists, whatever it may be that is relevant for displaying your information in the best possible way. Then that is something that is going to affect your SEO, because the longer people stay on your content and read it, that'll get noticed by the search engines. And if they like what they read and how it's laid out and presented, and they go on to read more, and that gives you page depth, which is something we covered in one of the technical SEO videos, which you can go and look up. Page depth is going to give you, again, another boost to your SEO, and therefore ultimately in time your rankings on the search engines. So it's important for a number of reasons, and so because of that, you really want to spend a bit of time prettying up your website, for want of a better phrase. Now, what I've actually done in the blog post for this video, I've actually put an example of 2 pages with the same content side by side. One is fully broken up with titles, subtitles, images, lists, etc. And the other one is just a block of text. And you look at them side by side and you decide for yourself, if you're going to a website, which would you rather look at? I know there's always going to be the odd exception to something that says, I just want the information. Everything that gets in the way means I have to scroll down more, is just in my way and I don't want it. That's fine, but that's not the majority. And that is borne out by examples of people looking at the state of content, which I'll come on to a bit later in the next video. But it is something that has been analyzed, it has been looked at, and big blocks of text don't work as well as pretty pages. So make sure that your pages look good. When you're reviewing your content, you also want to look at things like the word count. So we've already mentioned, the headings, the multiple images, bullet points, list, highlights, bold and underline, all that sort of thing. But each piece of content should also be around really a single topic. You shouldn't be spreading out amongst too many topics in a single piece of content. If they're becoming large because they're covering more than one subject, you're probably better off breaking them up and making them their own standalone piece of content, and then just putting references in the content to the other. That will also help with your page depth and keep people clicking on your website, which is good for SEO and ranking. Now, the tone that you use as well in your content can also affect whether or not people come away feeling that they've benefited from finding it and reading it, or whether it's left down to their mind. And that can have a lot to do with literally, like I say, the tone that you use in your message. And so whether you're upbeat or if you're putting out warnings and being wary, you've got to get a balance so that ultimately people coming away feeling like it was worth the effort coming to your page and reading your content. On the content, I've just touched on the length of the content just briefly and splitting it up. Now, there is actually, I'll do it on this video. Let's talk about the state of content in marketing, content marketing today. So if you're writing a piece of content and it's really short, let's say sub 300 words, the chances are that's probably going to struggle to rank on search engines. And so really, when you're creating any kind of content, probably 300 is the minimum you want to be aiming at, but maybe take it up to 400 or 500 words. Now, whatever the length of content, the absolute last thing you want to do is pad it out. You don't want to use overly complicated structuring on your sentences and paragraphs to make things longer because you can. That's a really bad thing to do. What you're better off doing is finding other related things to talk about, or where it might affect things. If you take a step back from your content and look at what problem you're solving, put it into context, understand where it is in a process, and you could refer to either earlier steps or later steps in that process to make it longer and more relevant and actually give it context. And that is really going to help you with people coming away from your content feeling like it's really helped a lot. Now, in the state of marketing reports, if you do a search for just that on Google, you will find a number of them over time. But I was reading one last year. It was put together by SEMrush, which is one of the big search engine marketing tools. They've got a really powerful tool to help agencies and businesses with their SEO. And they were looking at how the length of content and how it was formatted actually affected the number of unique page visitors it got, and how many backlinks it got, how many shares it got, and all of the engagement. And up around the 12 to 1500 words per article, they kind of seem to be the sweet spot. But when it came to getting more backlinks in certain areas and getting more shares, then actually it was a case of some of the larger pieces of content, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 words, actually did just as well, and they were getting more, I think, unique visitors. What I'll do in the blog post, I'll drop a link to that report, and you can go and download it for yourself if you're interested. But it really does come up with some really fascinating numbers, because the longer the content, essentially, the more unique page views it got. If it was shorter, it was getting fewer backlinks for the most part. There were one or two minor exceptions. Longer headlines got more shares. Better formatted content got more shares. Posts with more images. So they were looking at things like, if you've got a single image, it would get, I think it was something like 50% more shares than with no images. But if you went up to 4 images, it was something like 70% more shares. And so having those images that are relevant to your content scattered throughout your post are a really good way of increasing engagement. So I'd recommend you go and take a look at that. But whatever you do, like I said earlier, if you need to make your content longer, the very last thing you want to do is pad it out and just make it long-winded and complicated and say more than you need to get the point across. You're far better off to break out your content into steps and then define those steps and give, context and answers based on each of the sub-steps of your main topic. On that, the main topic, so we're going to talk a little bit about keyword density. So having a main keyword for your content basically will keep you focused, and using long tail keywords and LSI keywords will actually help you keep your content interesting and relevant, and we will be coming onto those in later videos. But if you find that your keyword density for a single word is above 2 or 3%, then that's getting on towards keyword stuffing. And whilst it won't necessarily hurt your content outright, it will make it feel slightly more repetitive. Using synonyms and longer tail keywords and related keywords to your subject, not only does it help the search engines understand better what your content is about, what it's delivering, what it's solving, it also makes it more interesting to the reader, thereby potentially keeping them on the page longer and hopefully reading more of your other pieces of content. So part of making your content's value sort of cumulative over time is actually covering a range of topics and then doing an internal linking structure on your SEO to bind them all together so that people can find all of the answers they need. And whilst they'll all be themed around your business and your services and you and what you provide, having a plan for the subjects, the topics, keywords, etc., what you're going to write about over the next 3 to 6 months is a really good way to manage your content creation and stop you getting what's called keyword cannibalization, which again we'll talk about in a later video. There are some great tools out there for helping with this. So if you get a keyword and you want to write about it and you want to find the synonyms and latent semantics in index keywords, what's related to your subject, things like Grammarly. So if you go to Grammarly.com, that's a really great writing tool that you can help. There are others out there, but I mean, one thing that I like about Grammarly, which is the one that I personally use, is not only is it picks up on all the obvious, it's the spelling mistakes, punctuation, double spacing and all the obvious things, but it also gives you an overview of the tone of your content. And I talked about this just a little bit earlier. The tone of how you deliver your content can really affect how people come away thinking about it and whether or not they'll think to come and look you up again in the future. And Grammarly will give an indication of what it thinks your content is in terms of its tone. And I've actually dropped in a little screenshot in the blog post of this, of some of the ranges of things that it will detect. So I'll read a few out here. So disapproving, accusatory, unassuming, formal, forceful, angry, concerned, egocentric, neutral, optimistic, excited. These are all things in terms of the words that you use and how they're structured. It can detect certain tones. So that's pretty useful, right? And so if you want something to be a bit more upbeat and you're coming across as neutral, you can change some of the words or phrases and actually help with that, depending on what your subject is. So this is, essentially what you're going to be doing on each individual piece of content on your website that's already been published. So you're going to go through and you're going to check all of the things that we've just talked about to make sure it does actually fit in and complies with kind of best practices for creating content for a content marketing strategy, and also to make sure that it's got the best chance of people actually seeing it and thinking, oh, this looks good, actually reading it and then hopefully consuming more of your content and then taking you up on any offers, lead magnets or ways to contact you that they can, which is ultimately what it's all about. It's about filling that pipeline of prospects for you to get more customers with your content generation strategy. So as I said at the top of the video, if you've got any questions or queries, please do feel free to ask. And in the next video, we'll go a bit more in depth on actually doing a full content review. So rather than just doing not content review, this is the content review, doing a full content audit and actually having a much more clearly defined approach to the content that you've already got, plugging that into a plan for the future and designing a strategy that's really going to push your content strategy forward for your marketing, your business, and generating those leads in your pipeline. So that's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please, like I say, do feel free to comment, get in touch, ask questions if you do have any. And until the next video on the content audit, enjoy the rest of your day and goodbye for now.